Very often I find, as I think poets often do, that it's one little detail that somehow unlocks a poem which you might not even have known was there. Just as sometimes when you're working very intently, a kind of shadow poem creeps up on you. This poem owes its existence to that detail in the second line. The Cablecar. The silver box rose lightly up from the valley, ape easy, hanging on by its one arm. In minutes it had shrunk the town to a diagram, the leaping river to a sluggish leat of kaolin, the fletched forests to points it overrode. It had you in its web of counterweights, of circles evolved to parallel straight lines. Riding the long slurs, it whisked you over the moraine's hopeless rubble. It had your heart in your mouth at every pylon where it sagged, leaned back, swooped on. It had you hear how ice cracked on the cable. It had you watch it throw an already crumpled shadow of bent steel onto the seracs. It made you think of falling. By the time it lowered you back to the spread valley, to the broad-roofed houses decorated with lights, you could think only of what it was like to step out at the top onto the giddy edge of snowfields still unprinted, that pure blaze, to be robbed of your breath by the thin air, by a glimpse of the moon's daytime ghost on solid blue. In this next poem, air is still the element, but it's that rather more mundane world, perhaps, of the airport departure. Another parting. Remember how we gunned the car down the motorway towards the airport's absurdly slow litanies of departure. Check-in, the catechism of security questions, the electric angelus of chimes, passport control, the gate. When somehow we managed to say goodbye, we felt we were being crushed by the weight of time that had massed above us, like the grey cloud into which you would go. And through it all, an orphan half-phrase rang in my head, but a mad contradiction of what was real. Time that is given. Today, as another parting comes closer, the words recur, along with that cloud which moves over each lived minute of love. But today, those minutes have all the brightness of your favourite gemstones, the steady burn of garnets, the amethyst's clear purple, the mallow green of malachite with its swirl of black contours beneath the surface, as if parting itself could just be like seeing sunlight pinch the ocean into points of sparkle, or like the way in which now that phrase finds its sudden completion. Time that is given has no shadow. No shadow, simply the winking grains of all those minutes, which fire and flare along the runways that lead into darkness, and beyond, the calm patterns of the stars, the bearings which fix our new arrivals. As I mentioned with the Cablecar poem, it's often just a telling detail that somehow triggers the poem, and sometimes you find it quickly, sometimes it surprises you, sometimes you never do. But this poem, The Enclosures, rather strangely brings together a visit to Tutankhamun's tomb and the arrival of a letter. So it's air again, but this time airmail. The Enclosures. 4 unexpected meadow flowers slide out from the sky blue letter you sent from Kyrgyzstan. A clover with pink bristles, a blue vetch faded to light mauve, a yellow crucifer, a white chickweed. They lie here tiny, flattened, intact, as delicate as any of the wreaths found buried with the Ithyphallic boy-king and all his rubble of riches. The collarette with little love-apples and berries of woody nightshade strung on strips of palm, or the farewell garland of olive leaves, blue water-lily petals and cornflowers, which someone left on the dark threshold. These, too, paling with absence, recast love's spell as open pathos, and time as immortelles. I started off reading poems all in one way or another in the context of the element of air, but actually water is the stuff. And ever since I can remember, I've loved the sea as my father did, and I love being on the sea, not in it. Most sailors don't like swimming. This next poem owes quite a lot to my experience of the sea, if that isn't putting it too portentously, as a boy, just going to the cinema and seeing these endless films about the sea, all the World War II films, miniature submarines. They all seem to have Kenneth More and people like that in white polo neck sweaters scanning from the bridges in their huge outsized binoculars. So there are kind of memories of going to the cinema as a kid and seeing that kind of film built into this poem. But it's also the very strange thing of water pooling on water. Rain at sea. It rings the raddled waves, pocking the long troughs with icy shot, replacing the horizon deftly with its cold sea rain ghosts. Of the captain pinned in the tall wheelhouse, his pinched and bearded face that peers onto sheer disasters, the oncoming truth of irrefutable house-high crests. Of the green cabin boy, so pale and pretty, felled by sea fever, tipped from under the ensign in the lee of the Horn, the crew on deck grim-faced. Of the ship that steers through every weather, doubling the cape of immoderate hope, wheel-lashed, bound for the shores of dark Narragonia, never, never. The rain, the seething rain that falls, knows more of soft corruption than any churning depth. The sea's decks, awash, grow wormy as any wreck. What goes round comes round. I wrote this because I enjoyed watching Snooker on television, and the poem ended up on television, which will teach me. Snooker players. They whistle the fine smoke of blue dust from the queue, suave as gunslingers, never twitching one muscle too few. At ease, holstering their thumbs in trimmest waistcoats, they await their opponent's slip, the easiest of shots miscalculated. Their sleek heads shine, spangled with a sure knowledge of every angle. Once at the table, they bend in level reverence to squint at globe after globe, each with its window of light glinting on cushioned greener than green, the rounded image of reason. One click, and cosmology thrives, all colours know their seasons, and tenderly God, in white gloves, retrieves each fallen planet with love. Watching them, who could believe in the world's lack of balance? Tucked in this pocket of light, everything seems to make sense, where grace is an endless break, and justice skill repaid, and all eclipses are merely a heavenly snooker displayed. Yet, all around, in the framing darkness, doubt dogs the game. At the bedside. Perhaps it is not, after all, the whole story which races through the heads of the dying with the gloss of last words in waiting, but some inconsequential detail which just happens to have stuck. Say, for instance, the taste of a boiled egg eaten when a child in St. Austell, by a window looking out over kaolin mountains, the sweetness of the yolk against the tangy bread and butter. Or the perfect round of apples at the foot of a tree in Brittany so scrawny as to make fruit seem miraculous. It looked as if it had shed them all at once as a single golden earth halo. Or the view of the old bridge at Mostar, its high brow soaring and swooping above the Neretva, or the drugging smell of red valerian, or the feel of silk rubbed between the fingers. But perhaps such images are only the journeys of wishing and warding for those who wait by the bed, for whom also it is late, and who cannot ignore the tut and sigh of the morphine shunt.